Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Heal the Shadow in Your Relationships 2. And today I am very pleased to have with me a fellow practitioner, Wendy Silvers. Thanks for being with us, Wendy.
Thank you, Neola. Thank you for this work. Thank you for doing this summit. I'm honored to be part of it.
And I'm just going to tell everybody about you. Wendy Silvers is a former entertainment publicist who brought high visibility to many high-profile celebrities and projects. And then she had a spiritual awakening and decided to create a career where she could combine her intuitive capacity to mine others' greatness with her advocacy for women, children, families, and deep spirituality. She's an inspirational speaker, author, blogger for Huffington Post, spiritual life coach, a mindful parenting educator, and the founder of the Million Mamas movement. And she lives in Southern California with her visionary husband and powerful teenage daughter. Wonderful, Wendy. Again, welcome.
Thank you so much, Neola. Thank you very much.
I would love to hear about the Million Mamas movement. Tell us what that is.
Oh, sure. The Million Mamas movement is a global organization that is dedicated to inspiring, empowering, and engaging that mama power as leading the way for peace and transformation in the world.
I love
Making
it.
sure that women, it's so interesting to me because it's really about up-leveling the way women and mothers treat themselves and how they treat their children and how society treats women, mothers, and children. And of course, when you take care of the mothers, you take care of the children, but you also take care of the family because mothers are the spiritual heart of the family.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that and say absolutely. When a mother takes good care of herself, she's just going to be able to give better care for her children and her family. And that's where it all starts. That's where life starts, is right there in the family. So we're talking, of course, today about the shadow, and we're going to get into that, about the shadow of parenting and everything. But I know, woohoo, it's a juicy topic. But tell us what led you to do the work that you do.
Thank you for asking that. Well, I have been involved. I called myself a child advocate when I was much younger. Even when I was doing PR, I was always very moved by taking care of the children, taking care of the women. And so fast forward to becoming pregnant, and I really felt an alchemical quickening inside of me regarding mothering, regarding parenting, and I was matriculating through Agape's International Spiritual Center, the university, and I became a licensed practitioner. And within months of my licensing, I began teaching heart-centered or mindful parenting. It felt very natural and right for me to start at the roots so that we can have a kind and just global society. And then as I continue to do this work, as practitioners, our charge is to constantly check in, meditate, and vision, as Michael Beckwith has taught. And so one day in August of 2011, I had gotten done my meditation sitting, and I did a visioning, and I went to the gym. And I in my sitting, I asked, how can I be of greater service to families, to women, to children? How can I bring more of myself? What can I do to really assist what I felt needed to be assisted in the world? Use me. And I went to the gym and I was on the elliptical, and I believe the elliptical coordinates the left and the right hemispheres of the brain.
Sure.
And all of a sudden I heard his dad just stopping by to say hi. So I just went, oh, hi, Arthur. And then kept going. And then I heard it again. I heard Million Mamas March. I heard Washington, D.C., Mother's Day. And so being spiritually inclined, I know that when I hear something, typically I say yes. I check it out. I use discernment. And so I said yes. And within a week, I was told that this was not a one-day event. It was a movement. It was about really uniting women and activating that mothering energy, the great mothering energy that the Dalai Lama refers to within women, whether they birth a baby or they have babies on their hands, to really create a world of greater peace. And that is how the Million Mamas movement came to be. And I continue to do mindful parenting work and empowering moms. And as a spiritual life coach, I just bring that component to people so that they can maximize and monetize their passions into professions.
So tell me again, because the Skype buffered a little bit. What was the first thing that you heard when you were on the elliptical?
Million Mamas March.
Oh, you heard that in your head. You heard a voice.
Oh, very clear, very distinctive, and
Awesome.
repeated itself. Yeah.
Awesome.
And one of the first people that I called was Michael Beckwith.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, I just love that you say, that this is your contribution to world peace and changing the world, because that's exactly how I feel. Like I came from an environment in my family where my parents were constantly arguing, and they were quite violent with each other and with us as well. And in school, I have very violent teachers. And as a kid, I just knew this is not right. This is not good. And there's got to be a better way. And I just kept trying to find that better way. So I always tell everybody, if we can all learn to get along in our relationships, this is, my contribution to world peace. So yes. I know you're always saying world peace begins at home. So tell us what that means to you.
For me, the whole concept of peace is peace in action. I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post once, and it said, love and peace are verbs, not nouns, and they're actually both. And so what does it look like to live into, to activate love and to activate peace, and to find ways to communicate that are compassionate and nonviolent and effective? So many times people think that, oh, well, if you're nonviolent, you're weak. And it's the reverse, because to hold that space of nonviolence and compassion requires so much strength, because typically the impulse is to just give as good as you've got. And when you're practicing compassion, it means that you are intentional and mindful, and that you move your ego out of the way, or the shadow that wants to get in there. So for me, when you do that at home, and also home is where the heart is. And when a mother is pregnant, the environment of the mother impacts the fetus. Yes. So everything that's going on, it's so holistic and interconnected. And so world peace begins at home. You cannot be critical to a child or harsh to a child and then expect them to love themselves and to love other people. Yeah. So when one can do their own inner work so that they're available to these little super beings that come into their world, then we have a real chance at transforming our culture that's very militaristic into one that's harmonious.
Yes. Well, I just love how you say that it actually takes a lot more strength to be nonviolent, because you have to be present, you have to be aware, you have to watch what you're saying, watch what you're doing. And you're absolutely right. It does take a lot more strength. So you said that you discovered there was a shadow in your parenting. So tell us how that unfolded for you.
Well, I'll take it back a couple steps in terms of couples, because I love to talk about this. So when people they meet somebody and they go on a first date, ostensibly it's the two of them, but really it's the two of them and their parents and any blended family members that are going on the date and that continue to date. And then when one gets married or decides to have a committed relationship, then all the unconscious generational patterning about what it means to be in a committed relationship, how does one act, comes into play. And so after that bubble of the first maybe 3 to 7 months of passion and boundaries dissolving and merging, all of a sudden you're like, who are you? Who am I? And that happens. Well, when you add child to that, it's like putting Miracle Gro on the places within you that are needing attention. And so for me, I had a mom that was extremely critical, not very happy, didn't have a lot of egoic strength, definitely loved me, but her perceptions were very distorted. My dad was so sweet, and he would want peace at any price, but he wasn't weak. He just would want, to make sure, oh, everything's fine. And there was a lot of trauma and drama in my early childhood. So I made certain unconscious decisions. And so I began my spiritual path actively when I was approximately, I want to say 18, 17 and a half, 18. I began my work, but then I went into my inner work, and I thought when I got married that I was ready to go. And then I got pregnant and I had a baby, and all of that stuff that I thought that I had resolved, a lot of it I had, but there was definitely stuff that came up for me with regards to mothering, the way that I was mothered. One of the reasons that I love doing the work that I do so much is that I believe it offers the opportunity for people to reparent themselves in the ways that they would like to have been parented. So I jokingly call it the gift with purchase. And so when I became a mom, I just became aware of the ways in which I hadn't been mothered and the ways in which I did not mother myself. So in mothering my child, I got to see the places where I wasn't available to myself, or the ways in which I didn't have boundaries, or the ways in which I would get angry. And it became my own curriculum, my own personal curriculum.
Yeah,
And the shadow
excellent.
is there.
Excellent way of putting it. I mean, really, and I love, this is what the work is all about for all of us. We have to learn to reparent ourselves. Inside of us, there is a hurt inner child. We're holding those emotions somewhere in our body. And bottom line is, if you didn't have the parents, and you know what I find with my clients, even when they say they had fantastic, great, amazing parents, there's always something. There's that one moment that you're a baby lying in a crib crying, feeling totally helpless, and mom has to answer the phone first, it's inevitable that there's always a moment. And as a child, you just don't have the wherewithal to handle that and process the emotions. So we all get this stuff stuck in ourselves, in our shadow. And then, like you say, we have to reparent ourselves. So I know you use this expression called bi-paradigm parenting. So tell me what that is.
Okay, thanks. Bi-paradigm parenting is when you are engaged in a particular, like I come through the lens of compassion and empathy and connect and nonviolence and connection. So somebody might be in a relationship with somebody who's much more authoritarian. And so the child grows up in a bi-paradigm where one parent parents from a particular perspective, and the other parents from the opposite or conflicting. And so it can be really challenging for the child on one hand, and then it can also be really helpful and empowering because they learn how to navigate two different paradigms. But that's what a bi-paradigm means, when there's two different ones in one place.
Oh, okay. So you know what? I think that's not uncommon. Because how many times are both parents on the same page? I don't think it's that common. Everybody comes from their point of view. What I see in parents is most of the time they're not even aware that they're coming from a paradigm.
It's very true. They're not. It takes an enormous amount of awareness. I'm currently finishing a 12-week series with these wonderful parents from England, and we've joked, at the very beginning we joked because the typical British stiff upper lip, don't show your feelings, and these parents they said that's why we're here, that's why we want to work with you, because they're so hungry to shift the paradigms. And as we've gone along, week after week, it's been so fascinating because a couple of them went to boarding school, and so and then a couple of them didn't. And my parents were fabulous. But just as you said, all of a sudden, as we've been going through this course that I'm teaching, they've had these ahas and insights, and I've watched them heal. It's so magnificent to behold that, right? When we do our work with clients to work. And I wanted to say, I'm also a hypnotherapist. And when you spoke about emotions and energy getting stuck, that's one of the joys that I've had as a hypnotherapist, is I watch that transformation. Because it's when you work with somebody in that kind of the beta or the alpha state, it's really surrenders the conscious defenses of, my parents were fabulous and wonderful, and which many are, they're well-meaning, but it's been really beautiful.
Every parent is well-meaning.
Yes.
They just don't have the skills. They don't have the awareness. They don't see themselves because the shadow's coming out.
It is really true. It's very true when you talk about the shadow. It's so interesting because it's not only the anger of the shadow, but it's when you think about so many times, what I have found is when parents get triggered, it's usually the places that they didn't get what they needed when they were growing up. And so they resent their children, but they're not conscious of their resentment of their children. Or there's mothers with teenage girls that are jealous, or they get into competition with their daughters, or partners feel like they're in competition with each other, because when a woman becomes a mom, or if it's a same-sex relationship and you are caring for this child, their needs come before the parent. And so watching that play out is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, is this what you want to say about how trauma and the shadow emerge in marriage and in parenting? You know, do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, it can be very subtle, depending on the level of trauma. There's trauma can happen, like you said before, the interpretation. There's covert trauma, subtle trauma, which is tricky sometimes to really navigate, because when things happen under the age of 2 and it's a nonverbal, the child is nonverbal, they can't always talk about what's happened. They just know something did. Right. And then there's the very overt trauma, where that's healable, and it's all healable, but it comes out differently for different people because of the coping mechanisms. Right. And sometimes, there's people, like, for instance, there's people in spiritual communities where they only want to talk about light and love. And that is definitely the law, right? We deal with light and love. And what about the emotional journey? How do we deal with the emotions that come up? It's okay. They're just emotions. And so but when somebody's been traumatized, it reverberates on a deeper level. So there's more of a patterning. There can be a blind spot. There could be somebody that's so wonderful, but they keep having this one particular area that they just don't seem to be able to resolve. And they blame, or they point fingers, and it's only because there's some unhidden trauma that they haven't recognized.
Yeah.
So then the shadow takes over.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you like to see transform in love relationships?
The commitment to do your own inner work, to be willing to do whatever it takes to do your own inner work, and to be present and available to that, and to recognize, I remember there was a time when I didn't even realize that I was blaming my partner for things. Something would happen and I would get triggered, and I would say things in a way that was very blaming, and I didn't even realize it. And then finally I got it. I really got it, because I slowed down, I listened. There's certain things that I think couples can do to connect that's very neutral. Yes. And so I definitely should. Hello, that's Huggy, everybody.
How cute. See,
Right?
we're talking
That's
about how to
Huggy.
transform love relationships, and the kitty cat shows up and says, I'm part of that. I want to be part of
It's
a
so true.
transformed love relationship." It's
It's
funny because she
true.
looks like the shadow behind you.
Oh, that's so funny. He's very dark gray. He's so
Oh,
sweet.
he's a
Um,
he. How
yeah,
cute. So I love what you're saying about, everybody's, it would be great if everybody knew to do their inner work. And it would be fabulous if we got taught this from an early age, that there's inner work
exactly.
to do. And
Well, my desire, of course, would be that mindful parenting and non-violent parenting is accessible and is I don't I want to say it is a very strongly suggested when a couple, you know how couples would do pre-marriage counseling, that when couples are pregnant or when they first have a baby, that they go through this and they have the opportunity to really explore, oh well, I get that, or this is the way that I saw my parents do this. And because what happens so often in terms of the shadow is that when a parent is tired, when a parent is stressed, if there's somebody sick, if there's financial challenges or employment challenges or what have you, that there's very unconscious behaviors. You can call it the ego, you can call it
yes,
unconsciousness, the shadow. So then what happens is, rather than a parent having the wherewithal to say, I'm feeling really scared, I feel really stressed, I'm a little concerned, I know it's going to be okay, but I'm really, really triggered right now, I need to just take some space, there's that reaction.
yeah,
And then the other person reacts to that, and then the fireworks start. So in a perfect world, I would love to see this in, offered. I've taught it at Agape. I'm looking to teach it again. I teach it privately and at various places. I'd love it to be part of school curriculums, so that there are the tools for people to navigate
yeah.
the tricky stuff, because the tricky stuff is going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And my passion about all of this is that our society tends to be afraid of the emotional content that, we're taught, either avoid it, don't look at it, stuff it down, control yourself. And it's not like, oh my God, you have to go there, you have to look at it, you have to release it. That's the only way it's not going to have its power over you. So there is a lot of awareness and education that's definitely needed in this area.
Yes,
That's for sure. And when you
yes,
talk about compassion, which I think is the answer for
yeah.
the triggering, the emotional upsets, the miscommunication, having compassion for ourselves, for everybody we're involved with, can that be learned?
Yes, absolutely. Well, part of the reason that it isn't learned is because we live in the dominant paradigm that exists right now is power over.
Uh-huh.
When you are in a compassionate relationship, it's power with, and it is the intention to empower the people that you're with, so that it's not top down and hierarchical, but it's lateral. And so once we shift that paradigm, then their hearts soften. The reason that people that have fortresses around their hearts is because they're used to this power over paradigm, where they're marginalized, or they're diminished, or they have to fight for things. There's that competition. There's not enough room for everybody, and that sets up a lot of trauma and a lot of shadowing. But when you take that away, there's a softening. And I want to say that something that I teach is something called fierce compassion. Because again, many times people think, oh, compassion, who's got time for that? That's that soft, weak stuff. I got to make things happen.
That
And
wimpy
so,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so fierce compassion is compassion that doesn't necessarily say, I'm going to lay on the ground and you can walk over me. Fierce compassion says, oh, no, that's not going to happen on my watch. We need to find a different way for that to happen. And we need to find a different way for communication to unfold. Or you're not going to do that to me. You're not going to do that to my child. That's fierce compassion. It's not only sitting there oming, which is the misconception for people when they hear the word compassion. It's so interesting, the connotation.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you're saying there, if you take compassion through and follow it through to the end of how it filters through about everything, then you're going to have compassion for the person that is not having their needs met because they're being compassionate. In other words, you turn that compassion towards everybody. So we're looking for win-win. We're looking for win-win-win. We're looking for everybody to win. And so there doesn't have to be one victor and then the person who has to submit. Like you're saying, that's the old paradigm. Compassion just means feeling for people, even feeling for the person that you might call the predator, or the perpetrator is the word actually I was looking for. Yeah. So compassion for them because they don't know why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't see their own shadow. They're not in touch with what happened to them as a kid or whatever, So
yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned and that I teach is that every human being at every time of the day, every adult, every child is doing the very best they can to get their basic human needs met. And when we communicate and we are in relationship through compassion and empathy, there's an awareness that nobody's doing something to you, but they're trying to get their needs met. Now that's a while to get to. That's a journey, right? To really live into that. And so, but when you have that ability to recognize that everybody truly is trying to get their needs met, and that it's the strategies that they use, doesn't mean that you have to be in a relationship with them. Doesn't mean you have to hang out with them. It doesn't mean that you have to condone what they're doing. It's just recognizing that if they could do better, they would do better. Just like myself, there's situations that if I could have done better, I would have. And that empathy, giving somebody empathy, including myself, is the ability to be present to somebody else's process without necessarily saying anything or doing anything.
Absolutely. And so like you say, if you have such a person around you, it doesn't mean you don't put a boundary down. You absolutely, that is part of the compassion. Now you're having compassion for yourself as well as the other person. It's like, okay, you are not in a place where you know what you're doing. So I've got to put some space here until you either get to that place, or if you never do, then I got to keep that in place,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's the same way with children. I mean, they need to have container. They need to be held. There needs to be a way. So many times parents will, or adults will have this misunderstanding that if you're a mindful parent or a heart-centered parent, that you let a child run all over you. But when you really look at the relationship as a relationship where connection matters more than anything, and you take away the power over paradigm, then you're really looking to empower that child and to really recognize that all behavior is an expression of an unmet need. So what is the unmet need, and how can you be with your child just like an adult? The ability to set a boundary that might disappoint. How can you be with them and be with yourself?
Yeah, and be with yourself in the process. That's a very interesting thing that you said. All behavior is a result of an unmet need. I love that. So that's a good thing for all of us to keep in mind, whether we're parents or not. Wendy, it's been such a pleasure to have you with us. And I really appreciate your wisdom and everything that you had to say today, which benefits not just mothers and parents, but all of us in general. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, Thank you, Neola. Thank you, everyone, for joining and supporting this. Because when we really address this, we can transform our world, our individual worlds, and then the greater world.
And then from our individual world, we affect the greater world. So
completely.
That's how it works. Okay, everybody, thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for the next installment of Heal the Shadow in your relationships too. Bye-bye.
Peace.